No way. Is this guy actually making a Bloodborne boss ranking in 2025? Absolutely I am. The outside world is too scary, so I have too much free time on my hands. This free time has led me back to the masterpiece that is Bloodborne. I have a huge appreciation for this game because it introduced my love for the Souls genre. So what better way is there to show that appreciation than by giving all my opinions on each boss? Notice that I did say my opinion. Some of you are 100% going to disagree with me, so please be respectful about it because I will cry on my bathroom floor if I read a mean comment. My criteria for this ranking is pretty simple. The main factor to consider for me is the enjoyability of a boss. Am I having fun, or does the fight feel like I just want to move on to the next boss? Of course, there are other subcategories to consider like difficulty, atmosphere, and the overall satisfaction of the encounter, but keep in mind it's mostly about the fun factor. Bloodborne has a lot of bosses that I find to be some of the best in the series, but there's the other side to that coin. There are some downright disappointing bosses, so I do apologize for the negativity towards the bottom of the list. Last few things before we get started. I'll have timestamps in the description if there are any bosses in particular you're looking for. Also, I have never spent this much time on a video, and I really stepped up my editing to bring this video to you guys. This is a very small channel, so if you do enjoy the content, consider returning for more and maybe even hitting some of those fancy buttons below. But without further ado, this is Bonfire Project, and let's start with some of the worst bosses in Bloodborne. I really do wish that the one Reborn was a good boss. The presentation and atmosphere are perfectly fitting for what Bloodborne is, and he has one of the best cutscenes in the game, but the same can't be said for the actual fight. As I said earlier, my most important aspect for a boss fight is the enjoyability of it. Unfortunately, I got zero enjoyment out of this fight, and I wish he wasn't a mandatory encounter. The one Reborn is a boss that can be very easy, but most of the time, the difficulty is simulated to be a harder fight. What I mean by this is that when you die in this fight, it's usually bullshit. His limbs have random AoE explosions that can just kind of appear. He can summon random falling bodies that do way more damage than they should, and it's difficult to tell what he's doing, especially when he does the huge ground AoE of like weird fluids. I personally feel that this all adds up to a bad boss. One noteworthy thing that I can think of is his arena. Fittingly, it has plenty of space, so the player isn't usually ever stuck up against a wall. The upstairs part of the arena makes it feel unique to any other bosses in Bloodborne. There are 6 bell-ringing enemies that can make the fight harder that are located upstairs, so you always want to take them out before you begin fighting the one Reborn. However, I don't think this really affects his placement on the list. The one Reborn is unfortunately my least favorite boss in Bloodborne. I'm gonna start this one off with something positive because I'm about to throw a whole lot of shade at this man. In my opinion, Mikolash is one of the most unique bosses because of how different his fight is from any others in the FromSoft catalog. I also think he's the single most memorable boss of Bloodborne. Granted, that memorability is not for any good reasons, but I find my brain going straight to this fight when thinking of Bloodborne. The only fun I have with this boss is killing him, but even that gets taken away sometimes because he's really good at killing the player at the same time the player kills him. Thank you, game. I really wanted to beat him twice in the same playthrough. In the first phase, you have to play tag with this asshole until he gets stuck in a specific room, then the fight actually begins. But it's not much of one because he has one attack, which is pretty easy to dodge and makes the whole first part feel pointless. Once he's around half health, he just dips. You have to chase him again, but this time he can just teleport through mirrors. You can make him follow the same path each time, but it's still pretty frustrating. That's not the fun part of Mikolash though. He's another one of the bosses that shouldn't be as difficult as he is, and that difficulty is because of one specific move, that being a Call Beyond. This shit can just randomly one-shot you, and he loves to use it a lot in his second phase, which sucks because I would rather him use that move in the first phase. That way, if the fight's over, at least it's quick. To me, Migulash and the One Reborn can really be interchangeable for the worst boss in the game. I'm more so just feeling generous to this asshole right now. There isn't a whole lot to say about the Witches of Hemwick, but they are definitely the easiest boss in the game. This is another gimmick boss, but this one is based on the amount of LSD your character has done. It's just based on your insight level. If you go into this boss fight with any insight at all, the witches will spawn your sleep paralysis demons to chase you around as you look for the invisible witches. But if you go in with 0 insight, the fight just becomes you beating 2 helpless old people. Either way, it's an easy fight that requires very little brain power, and it's not a really fun boss. There really isn't any atmosphere or satisfaction for beating the boss. Similar to the witches, the Celestial Emissary is another boss that there isn't much to talk about. The only reason he's higher is because he actually fights back. The Celestial Emissary feels like a bit of a filler boss that was kind of thrown in the game. I understand where they put him, I just think there could have been more to the fight. There are added enemies in the arena, and honestly, they're more of a threat than the actual boss himself. I say that because the boss has 3 moves, one being a ranged attack that's really slow and easy to dodge, the other 2 attacks being melee moves that are very easy to parry and punish. I really don't think many players would notice if they just removed him from the game completely. The only reason I have this boss higher than the previous 2 is because I don't hate him. He's just kind of there. Since that's really just it for the boss, I'll leave you with a tip. You can tell which one is the actual Celestial Emissary by locking onto each one of them. The one that doesn't have a health bar when you lock onto it is the boss. Oh, and just a heads up, the next boss might turn some heads. I think the majority of people like them, but I think they are the single most rage-inducing fight in the game. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This guy's a fucking idiot. But don't click off the video just yet. Let me explain my thoughts. There are a lot of things to like about this fight. Presentation, boss design, arena design, a complex moveset, actual satisfying victories, and an overall creative masterpiece. With all that said, this should be an enjoyable fight that's ranked much higher. And it would be, if not for one thing that absolutely ruins Ebrietas for me, that being the charge attack. This attack is complete bullshit. She can do it from any range, and it's insanely difficult to not get caught because her entire body is the hitbox. It does too much damage and usually gets you killed because the camera kind of likes to have a stroke when Ebrietas is right next to you. This wouldn't be such an issue if she only used it once or twice per fight, but I swear to you, this fucker charged me over and over and over and over again. I hate this attack so much. I don't think I have ever been rage baited harder by a video game. It's sort of like she knew I wanted to gently blast a hole through my monitor, so she just kept doing it. Legitimately the most unenjoyable fight in the game to me. The only reason she's not last on the list is because everything else about the fight is well designed and fleshed out. It's a good boss excluding this one factor. It's a shame that one move can affect my opinion on a boss in such a large way, but enough bitching, we'll move on to the next boss and leave it at that. I'm sure there are some people who would put Rom at the very bottom of their list, and I can understand why that might be the case. Shit, I probably would have agreed with them if this list was based off my first playthrough. However, I think there are some things to appreciate about Rom. Something I think most of us can agree on is that she has one of the best boss arenas in the game. But the main reason Rom is up this high is because there are multiple ways to approach the fight, and I personally think that adds a lot to any boss. There are 3 main ways to go about fighting Rom. There's the slow but safe way, quick but risky way, and a mix of both. The slow option is to take out each individual spider before going after Rom in each phase. The quick option is to rush her ass down, ignoring all the little spiders. The problem with this is it's dangerous because the little spiders will gang up and jump you. But my personal favorite way is combining both options. In the first phase, kill all the little spiders so it's just a one-on-one with you and Rom. Use a beast blood pellet. Then repeatedly attack her head with bare fists. What this will do is build your beast meter, which significantly improves your damage. Then switch to your actual weapon and just start wailing on either side of Rom. This should do around 2/3 of her health bar. Then you ignore all the newly spawned spiders and just continue going for the kill. I find it enjoyable to have these options. Granted, Rom still isn't a well-designed boss, which is why she's still so low on the list. But I think Rom is the best of the worst, if that makes any sense. I would say we're at the point on the list where the bosses start to get a little better. The living failures are without a doubt the outlier for the DLC bosses. That's not to say they're horrible though. I do get some enjoyment out of this fight. They are definitely not a complex boss, but there is some difficulty to it. And that difficulty is keeping track of all of the failures. Since there are 4 of them, you would think it would be another shitty gank fight, but they're designed in a fair way that the player can easily handle. The failures will take turns going after you, while the other 3 either cast spells or just kind of walk towards you in the background. It lets the player focus on one at a time. This boss can still be difficult though, mostly because of how much damage they do and the sheer amount of health they have. This fight took me over 8 minutes in my recording. Some other things for this fight is the arena is great. The tree in the middle serves to separate them and guard the player from projectiles, and the failures have no business getting one of the best soundtracks in the game. It just does not make sense to me. Overall, they are a disappointing fight in the DLC, but not a bad boss as a whole. The Blood-Starved Beast is a good boss. In my opinion, this is the point in the game where people decide to keep playing or give up on Bloodborne. If you happen to be one of the players who gave up on this boss, I highly recommend getting back into the game because you are missing out on some amazing fights. Blood-Starved Beast is a very quick boss, and it can be hard to track her movements due to all the flap-like things strung across her body. We can't talk about this boss without talking about the poison. Once the Blood-Starved Beast enters the second phase, all of her attacks will build up poison, and it builds up almost instantly. You will need antidotes for this fight. The third phase is the worst because just being near the boss will poison you. If not for the poison factor, this could be an amazing early game boss. However, there is a way to make this fight way easier, and personally, it's how I do it every time now. You're gonna want to bring as many pungent blood cocktails as you can find. You're also gonna want some fire paper, which you can get from an NPC before the boss, and some beast blood pellets scattered throughout the map. When the fight starts, use the fire paper and the beast blood pellet. Then make your way to any of the corners in the arena and throw down one of those pungent blood cocktails. This will make the boss walk into or attack the wall, so you can get behind them and charge up and attack. This will put the boss into a staggered state, giving you a free visceral attack doing a ton of damage. Now just keep throwing down the cocktails and repeating the backstab till she's dead. There you go. Difficult early game boss is defeated. So, if you have given up on Bloodborne because of this boss, use this method and it will open up a whole new gateway for you, I promise. Lawrence is definitely a difficult boss. He does a lot of damage and attacks very frequently. I really enjoy bosses like this, but the problem with Lawrence is his second phase, and we'll get to that in a second. Lawrence has a surprisingly complex moveset for a boss that's basically just a reskin of the first boss you encounter in the game. It's a mix of quick swipes and heavy attacks. He usually pairs them together to combo the shit out of you. It really helps to keep the player on their toes and play safe during this fight. But once he gets to phase 2, the fight goes downhill quickly. I found myself dying to a lot of things that I kinda thought were bullshit. He loses his legs, starts crawling on the ground, trailing lava behind him, and mostly all of his melee attacks now have AoEs paired with them that can really fuck you up. It's very easy to get caught by a stray AoE you don't notice, and it leads to you getting comboed all the way back to the fucking Hunter's Lamp. It's not really a fun experience. I don't like this part of the fight, but thankfully a majority of it takes place in phase 1. He's also a very satisfying boss to beat, specifically because of the difficulty presented in phase 2. Amygdala, yes I said that right, is a boss I used to hate, but have grown to really enjoy. Throughout the game, you're gonna see a lot of these creatures, and in my first playthrough, I really just wanted to fight one of them. I got my wish, but I was kinda disappointed. However, now I just think it's cool that they gave the player the opportunity to even fight this boss. This can be a difficult fight if you go at it the wrong way. If you're like me, I instantly went for his legs because I thought it would be the easiest to hit, but hitting there does no damage, so just avoid doing that. The way FromSoft designed this fight makes it so that the player should always fight in front of Amygdala, waiting for it to lower its head or arms after one of its combos. Hitting the head does a lot of damage, so I would mostly aim for that. Fighting the boss this way makes it feel so much more enjoyable. It turns into a good back and forth, waiting for Amygdala to finish their attack, running in, getting a hit or two, and then retreating a little bit. It's very different from the usual playstyle of Bloodborne where it's attack, 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 and I kinda like this change. Personally, I think it's pretty impressive that they designed this boss in a way that's somewhat fun to fight. It's a big boss, so a lot of issues come up with that, specifically the camera and not being able to see what the boss is doing, but I think it's presented in a good way for Bloodborne. The player has to adapt to this boss and not really do what they've been told to do the whole game. If any of you like Elden Ring, I would really compare this boss to fighting the dragons in the open world. You also have to wait for them to lower their head and get some good damage in. Amygdala is just a well-rounded boss when it comes to movesets or different phases. Phase 1 is all about the melee combat, simple attacks that don't require too much attention. But phase 2 starts, and those melee attacks start getting AoE magic explosions paired with them, so you have to be a little more on your toes. And I don't know if this is completely accurate, but it seems like he starts to utilize more of his ranged attacks during phase 2. But phase 3 is just cool. It's where the fight really starts, in my opinion. This fucker rears up and rips 2 of his back arms off and starts using them as weapons. This doubles his melee range, so getting further away is not a good idea. It forces the player to adapt and stay closer to Amygdala. Overall, it's just a well-rounded and enjoyable boss for me. There are a lot of things about the moon presence that are just really cool. The cutscene, I have to say, is the best in the game, and some of the moves are just great concepts. Unfortunately, those are the best parts of this fight. This is the secret final boss of Bloodborne, and it feels almost like a letdown. Personally, I think he should have had 2 health bars and maybe a new 3rd phase, but I'm sure we all have our own opinions on that. It definitely could have been a more difficult boss, but it's still a great boss, and I enjoy it nonetheless. Moon Presence has a relatively complex moveset and some very interesting mechanics. Those mechanics being an attack that straight up reduces your health to 1. Your job here is to either heal up or use the rally mechanic to your best ability. Personally, I like to go with the rally mechanic because you get free damage on the boss. They're just standing still. The other interesting part is that the Moon Presence can remove your ability to heal temporarily, which is not a great combo when your health gets reduced to 1. It makes an otherwise mediocre boss a more memorable encounter. Other than that, he really just has melee combos and some AoE projectiles. Melee combos are really easy to dodge. You really just want to try to get behind the boss, and it's difficult for it to hit you. And the AoE projectiles are very slow, so the player can react to them pretty quickly. Overall, I think the Moon Presence should have had more health and did a little more damage. Usually I feel like the boss fight is over before it really even starts. It's an enjoyable and satisfying fight that I personally go out of my way to fight every time that I play Bloodborne. Now, these next bosses are going to be a little controversial, I think, because the next three are very similar and can really be switched around at any time depending on the day. So, I'm going to talk about all three of them and just take everything I say as a generalization for each of the fight. The three bosses taking numbers 11, 10, and 9, Vicar Amelia, Dark Beast Parl, and the Cleric Beast. Each one of these bosses fit the same niche, which are medium-sized beast bosses with combinations of quick light attacks and hard-hitting slow attacks. Now, I will say that they each have their own unique aspect. Amelia can heal herself if she gets too far away, Parl can transition in and out of his electric state, and the Cleric Beast serves as the tutorial boss for Bloodborne. An amazing tutorial boss, I might add. But they're all so similar to me because they're all handled in the exact same way. The best way to handle each of these fights is to go after each individual limb. A cool part about Bloodborne and their beast bosses is they have special mechanics to them. Each limb you break will stagger them for a second, allowing the player to shift focus to a different part of the boss. Eventually, this will result in a stance break, allowing the player a free visceral attack to do a lot of damage. This makes the flow for each of these bosses feel exactly the same, but personally I think that's a good thing because it's a good flow, it's a good fight. Fighting bosses like this is fun and engaging. It makes them feel so much more satisfying to eliminate than they actually are. If you do it quick enough, all three of them really won't be able to attack the player at all. I'll say that Amelia, Parl, and the Cleric Beast are all staples of Bloodborne in my eyes, and I'm really not even mad that they feel so similar because they're good. If you don't like how I rank these three, kindly let me know that I'm an idiot and feel free to make your very own tier list post. These three, interchangeable, any one of them can take the 9, 10, or 11 spot. I personally just think they're so similar that they need to be paired together. I gotta get this out of the way when I'm talking about Murgo, but this boss just wins the award for the coolest design in the game. Take your trophy, queen. Although Murgo doesn't have the most complex or difficult moveset, it's very satisfying to dodge and punish the attacks. Every one of her movements is super fluid and the player can read easily, allowing the player to perfectly time their dodges and punish when necessary. Provides a lot of fun for me in this fight. It's difficult to describe the overall flow to this fight, but it's one of the best. There aren't any unfair attacks that feel like bullshit Murgo can use. I'm sure there are some of you that think the Nightmare phase is a bad addition to the fight, and I can understand that point of view, but I think it's very fitting for Murgo's boss fight specifically. Also, it's really easy to deal with. It might not be the most intuitive solution, but if you just sprint in circles, the fog will eventually lift and the fight returns to that satisfying back and forth. Also, bonus points to having the unique message pop up at the end of the fight. Usually once you defeat a boss, the message says "Prey slaughtered," but when Murgo is defeated, Nightmare slain appears, signifying that you have finally killed this source of the nightmare in Bloodborne. I think it's just cool. Starting with Gehrman, you guys are really going to start to see a trend for my favorite bosses in Bloodborne. From now on, these bosses are just amazing, and I wish there was a boss rush mode in Bloodborne so I could just fight them whenever. Gehrman, the old man in the wheelchair who helps you throughout the game, ends up being one of the final bosses. It's a fantastic moment when he stands up out of nowhere and just threatens to take your life. It really caught me by surprise on my first playthrough. The atmosphere is amazing, and you fight Gehrman in front of the full moon moon while inside of this flower field. The flowers get kicked up into the air whenever you or Gehrman make a move. A cool detail is that he gets his abilities from the Moon Presence, a boss that we fought earlier on the list, and during his phase transitions, he will always look towards the moon because he wants the Moon Presence to give him a little boost. The fight itself is chaotic but clear, difficult but fair, and quick but readable. Something I haven't gotten to talk a lot about in this video is parrying in Bloodborne. Timing a gunshot before an enemy lands their attack will always result in a visceral attack. This is my favorite way to fight bosses in the game, and it's a shame that not every boss can utilize this mechanic. Gehrman really puts the pressure on, which makes parrying him all the more satisfying. Through his phase transitions, the fight just keeps increasing in pace. Gehrman has plenty of combos for you to learn and adapt to. He's one of those bosses that you're always improving on. Usually, at least for me, each attempt feels better than the last. A great final boss that puts your knowledge of the game to the test. The Shadows of Yharnam are a boss that I struggled with for a long time. I really hate the idea of gang fights, and I really don't like the idea of fighting 3 bosses at once. What changed? My Blood Level 4 run really opened my eyes to the complexities of this boss. There really is a solution to every problem I had with the Shadows. Is the boss grouped up? Use the tombstone in the arena to separate them. Think the Sword Shadow is too aggressive? Then parry his ass back to the Shadow realm. If you think phase 2 is a little annoying with the stretchy swords and annoying attacks, you can bring the caster and sword user down to low health and then defeat both of them quickly. This leaves the candle holding Shadow, which you can hit and then walk towards. Rinse and repeat till he dies. He has this weird AI pattern he likes to follow and you do it. Every time you fight the Shadows, you can do this. It makes the fight feel like this choreographed routine. Like some of the other bosses on this list, I can understand if you don't like the Shadows. It could be difficult if you don't know what you're doing, but the more I fought against them, the more I slowly grew to really enjoy this fight. Each Shadow has its own unique moveset, so it's not like you're fighting 3 of the same enemies, and each of their phases provides some sort of challenge for the player, especially if you get caught by one of those giant snakes in phase 3. Overall, the Shadows are a difficult boss with a complex way to handle them, and is a huge part of the charm to this fight. I do know that they add the Shadows as a normal enemy later into the game, but I still think they're a cool enemy nonetheless, and I still get a lot of fun out of this boss fight specifically. A hidden boss in the most hidden area of the game should be challenging. Ligarius fills this role perfectly. Castle Cainhurst has to be my favorite area in the game, and the boss all the way at the top of this frozen castle does not disappoint. Ligarius is a mix between a spellcaster and a certified master at throwing hands. Basically, Renala from Elden Ring if she was actually a good boss. This is another boss that can be parried, automatically making it a step above most. The spells that Ligarius casts aren't really annoying to deal with either. You don't have to run away from him or get behind any walls to avoid it. It's actually better to close the distance and dodge through them. Getting close means more melee attacks, which means more parry opportunities. His second phase transition is a very interesting part to the fight. If you let Ligarius charge up, then your bullets will literally bounce off of him, making parries impossible. But if you use a charge attack on his back while he's phase transitioning, he won't get that buff. The fight will just ramp up in difficulty and speed, but you can still parry him. This fact alone is a really cool addition because it gives the player some control on how they want to fight Ligarius. Personally, I think this adds a lot to the fight. You can choose to take the more difficult route, and it does feel accomplishing to win this way, but then there's the option, if you're like me, I really like parrying bosses, and if that gets taken away from me, it can take away from the fight, but I still like the ability to choose. And a really cool detail is that after you fight Ligarius and you win, he drops his crown, which is titled the Crown of Illusions. If you put it on and you start walking towards the throne he was sitting in at the start of the fight, it will unlock a secret area for you, which really solidified my opinion of Castle Cainhurst being the best area in the game. But with that, I'll leave you with 2 tips for this boss. If he ever launches into the air, make sure to dodge towards him to avoid the attack, and then immediately start charging up a heavy attack. This will hit him in the back if your camera's faced correctly, allowing for a free visceral. Something that can be annoying is when he plants his sword into the ground, it summons a shit ton of flying swords that kind of have a hit scan and they're really annoying to dodge. You can lock onto the sword and just shoot it to get rid of it instantly. Ligarius is a perfectly fitting boss for this area in the game, and I think he fits amazingly into Bloodborne's catalog. Now, I might get some flack for putting the second boss in the game this high on the list, but I don't know, he holds a special place in my heart. This is the single best tutorial boss in any of FromSoft's games, and I can stand on business with that statement. You might be thinking, I thought you said the Cleric Beast was the tutorial boss for Bloodborne. To that I answer, there are 2 types of bosses in Bloodborne. There are the unparryable beast bosses that require you to focus on specific parts. Then there are the best bosses in Bloodborne, the quick humanoid hunter enemies that are designed around the parry mechanic. Cleric Beast and Father Gascoigne serve as a tutorial for their niche. I always have a good time fighting Gascoigne, and I look forward to it every time I start a new character. He's super aggressive and forces new players to actually learn the parry mechanics. His fight teaches you everything you need to know about Bloodborne and their bosses. It teaches you how to deal with hyper-aggressive enemies, how to deal with projectiles by using obstacles in the arena, and he teaches you to dodge towards enemies, encouraging the player to be more aggressive, because if he does hit you, then you're right next to him to start swinging and getting health back with the rally mechanic. The most important part of this being is the player learning that Bloodborne is all about being aggressive, putting the pressure on the boss and not letting the pressure be put onto you. Getting hit doesn't mean back off and heal, it means you dive headfirst into the enemy, utilizing the rally mechanic. I personally think this is best used against the humanoid hunter bosses, which is cool because in the 3rd phase, Gascoigne just loses his shit and turns into a fucking werewolf, dialing the pace of the fight up to 11. The best part is that even though he is the big beast boss now, you can actually still parry him. You really can't do this with other beast bosses in the game, which enhances the satisfaction of the fight and makes it feel even more rewarding to learn his moveset with parries. I still remember beating him on my first playthrough. That rush of adrenaline was just unmatched from any other boss. I actually stopped playing Bloodborne for a few months because I got stuck on Gascoigne and I thought the game was too hard, but I did not know what I was in for. Lastly, if he's too hard for you, there's a tool that you can use that staggers him 3 times in the fight, and you can really abuse this to get a lot of free damage. You can find his daughter, who is an NPC in Central Yharnam, and she gives you a music box. This music box is an item that you can use up to 3 times in his fight. It's really just another cool addition to this fight. Gascoigne is the perfect tutorial boss because if you can beat him, then you really have the potential to beat every other boss on this list. Ludwig the Holy Blade is the first boss that you will encounter in the Old Hunters DLC, and holy shit is he an introduction to it. First, let's just talk about the design. Ludwig looks absolutely disgusting, and it fits so perfectly into what Bloodborne is all about. It's not just his design, but it's also the arena too. Fighting this amalgamation of a horse inside a dungeon full of bodies and blood, it's just nightmare fuel. But that's what makes the design so good, because the DLC takes place in the Hunter's Nightmare. It's all about nightmares. Then there's the crazy switch up to phase 2. Ludwig somehow retains some of his humanity, standing up on his hind legs and fighting you with the iconic Holy Moonlight Sword from all of the Souls games. The juxtaposition between phase 1 and 2 is really just unmatched. The only other fight that I've seen done this is Malekith the Black Blade from Elden Ring, and that fight was also amazing. And we can't really talk about the design of this boss fight without mentioning the music. Like, just listen to this shit and let it bless your ears for a few seconds. Now with the actual fight itself, the first phase of Ludwig is the hard part in my opinion. It's super chaotic as he's constantly charging the player and there are non-stop attacks. You can't parry this boss, so you really have to learn how and where to dodge certain attacks. A lot of mastering phase 1 is really just knowing your position. Also, he has a ton of different moves that can be woven all together, making it a more reaction-based fight where you have to pick your attack windows very carefully. Phase 2 is a whole different story, and it begins with an excellent cutscene. The fight becomes a lot easier to understand because his moves are more telegraphed with larger openings, almost like you're actually fighting one of the humanoid bosses. A detail that makes this part easier than phase 1 is that Ludwig can actually be staggered if you do a good amount of damage quick enough, and this can take out a large chunk of his health bar. Ludwig is a perfect boss and the #1 boss in Bloodborne for many people, and for good reason. Lady Maria is the perfected hunter boss of Bloodborne. FromSoft really took all of what makes the hunter bosses good from the base game and just amplified it by 10 for Maria. There is not a single flaw about this fight other than that she could just have more health. You can really take every positive thing that I said about Gascoigne and just double that shit. This really doesn't feel like a boss fight. It feels more like dancing, and what I mean by that is there's this underlying rhythm to the fight. It feels like you and Maria are really just taking turns being in control, but you can take that rhythm into your own hands when parrying. By no means is this an easy fight. Maria will still catch your ass off guard and combo the fuck out of you, especially in her second and third phase. Phase 2 begins when you see her stab herself, because why not, right? Then every one of her attacks will now have extended range because she uses her blood as a follow-up or extension to her base moves. It makes it so that the player needs to stay close or you're gonna get punished by the blood attacks, amplifying the pace of the fight because now backing away really isn't an option. If she hits you, good luck trying to heal. You're really going to need to utilize the rally mechanic to its fullest potential in this fight. Then comes phase 3. All of her blood attacks just light on fire, dealing much more damage and catching the player even if their dodge timings are slightly off. Every part of this fight is engaging and rewarding. I would fight Maria for hours if I could. Now with all that said, you would think she was #1, right? So who actually took that spot? The #1 boss of Bloodborne is the Orphan of Cause, otherwise known as... The perfect word to describe this fight is crazy. This fucker will not let you breathe. Your full attention is required to even have a chance at beating him. But it's not an unfair kind of difficulty. It's the get good kind, the best kind of difficulty. There are no bullshit attacks that are undodgeable. Every attack can be dodged and most of them can be parried. It's just a matter of trial and error, and there will be a lot of errors. I have played through Bloodborne way too many times and I still struggle with this boss. But that's the beauty of it. He does not discriminate, no matter if you're a new player, veteran, or even a vegan. This fucker will chase your ass down and hand deliver the best ass whooping you will ever have the pleasure of receiving. Cause still gets my heart racing when I get close to beating him, because I know he can just end my run at any moment, making this fight the single most satisfying boss to defeat in the game. You need to use all the skills that you have acquired through your playthrough on this boss, because he will test every single one of them. And if you think phase 1 is hard, you have no idea what you're in for phase 2. He will never stop attacking, ever. There is no time to think, only time to react. It's such a unique boss for Bloodborne because the whole time the player is taught to stay on the offensive and use the rally mechanic. But you're not in control of this fight, and it doesn't matter if you take a swing at him because he will hit your ass back. Every single button input made is important. One mistake leads to your run just being completely over. Orphan has always been my #1 boss in Bloodborne, and will hold a special place in my heart, not just for Bloodborne, but for every video game I've ever played. An absolute masterpiece in every possible way.